Any of you guys seen Hitch? Hitch is a great example of try-fail cycle. Because what happens in Hitch, the film, is Will Smith is this suave, debonair, knows women really well, so he thinks he falls in love with this girl against his expectations. He's like, I'm going to do all my suave, debonair things. And he comes up with these like dream, awesome dates, and they go horribly wrong every time for good reasons, but reasons that are not really his fault. You know, it's like he takes her to Ellis Island, you know, this dream date, and then finds out that, you know, he's like, oh, and your family immigrated, the name's right there. And then she runs out crying because her family, her father who immigrated was a criminal and is like a black sheep in the family. And, you know, stuff he couldn't have known. So he tries brilliant, wonderful things, and they go wrong anyway. For good reasons. One thing to stay away from, you all know about Deus Ex Machina, right? Does anyone not know that phrase? That's okay. Deus Ex Machina is a Greek phrase. It came from Greek plays where the writer would write themselves into a corner in the play, and at the end they would just have to have the gods come in and fix everything. It's called God from the machine. Well, what Deus Ex Machina generally is a lack of proper foreshadowing. All right? Things go right for the characters. If you foreshadow why they would go right, it works much more fulfillingly to the readers. Let's talk about promises and expectations in the Lord of the Rings films. Has anyone not seen the Lord of the Rings films? All right, finally one that nobody. Okay, great. I can actually use an example no one will be confused by or spoiled by. Lord of the Rings films. We have the second and third film kind of actually having the same plot structure in a lot of ways. I, as an analyst. They're, by the way, all excellent films. I like them quite a bit. I think Peter Jackson did the near impossible. But there's one thing that really bothers me, and it's not the sort of things that bothers most people. It's not Tom Bombadil or The Scouring of the Shire or any of those things. What bothers me is the plot cycle that they set up for the third movie. Let's look at these two movies. In movie 2, in film number 2, we have a big climactic moment. We have an army besieging us, and we're all going to die. Pretty big problem. We set up a plot cycle, and what is the plot that is set up? Do any of you remember? What's the plot that's set up? What is the promise made to the reader?
Gandalf is going to save him. Yeah.
Exactly. Gandalf says, survive 3 days, and I will be there to save you. That's not a Deus Ex Machina that Gandalf saves them, because the plot cycle and the promise made to the reader is your goal as heroes, reader, I mean watcher in this case, your goal as heroes is to last long enough for Gandalf to get there. And what do? They pull out all the stops, they try everything they can do, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. They're failing, they're struggling, it's really, really rough. But they survive to the third day, and Gandalf shows up in that beautiful moment where, you know, the sunrise happens and he comes up, because the movies do this wonderful thing of making Gandalf a metaphor for light. If you haven't seen that, watch it sometime. When he steps on the stage, light shines on him. I mean, it's just beautiful, the sort of things they do. I mean, his magic that he uses is almost always just light. You know, he comes up over the rise, and light shines down on the orcs, and they get blinded so that the cavalry charge can hit them. I mean, it's beautiful. He comes up, he saves them. The third movie, I had more problems with, because I felt that the promise, personally, of the third movie was, we have to defeat this orc army. We have to do it. There is no one who can save us. Now, it did kind of set up that Aragorn's going to go do this thing. So they did try, they foreshadowed, but I felt the foreshadowing was not nearly as effective, because they didn't promise us, if we survive, Aragorn will save us. They promised us, we need to fight, and all these different pieces of the army are coming together. And yeah, Aragorn's going to bring a piece of the army, and we're going to bring the riders of Rohan in, and we're going to bring all of these different pieces, and together we have to defeat this orc army. But what happened instead? We're failing, we failed. Oh, Aragorn shows up with an invincible army of ghosts who can destroy the entire bad guy army for us. We should have just stayed in and not fought. Because if we hadn't struggled at all, we would have been in the same situation. So that's why that plot cycle failed for me. And it's all about promises and fulfilling them. Make sense? Hopefully you can start to see some of these things. And hopefully, hopefully it doesn't ruin books and films for you. For most writers, you do have a period where it kind of ruins things a bit for you. Most writers get beyond that. But it's a few years, usually, hopefully, while you're in college. You're like suddenly analyzing everything and becoming that friend that no one wants to go to a film with. And they ask you what you thought of the book, and you start breaking it to pieces. They're like, no, just tell me what you thought of it. I did that for a while, some of my friends did that for a while. I've noticed that most people actually pull out of that and start going back to just enjoying. It's like when you're figuring all this stuff out, you can't help but pay attention to it. But then you get to a point where you start doing that subconsciously. And so part of your brain just still enjoys while part of your brain is analyzing. So you do generally get beyond it if you're worried about this, if it's happening to you. The change that happened to me, by the way, was after that all happened, I stopped being able to enjoy bad fiction or bad films. Well, I shouldn't say bad, but yeah, bad. I stopped being able to enjoy those. Like, there was a time where if I picked up a book, I finished it, regardless of what I felt about it or thought about it, because I just got to the ending. That stopped happening after I pulled out of this. No longer do I have patience for books that I'm not enjoying. I read them, I put them down, I don't finish them, I don't have time for this anymore. But books that are really good, I learn from and enjoy maybe even more than I did before, because I can appreciate the majesty and artistry of what they're doing. So, anyway, try-fail cycles. The reason that I call this the Indiana Jones style plot is try-fails tend to be the hero who just can't get a break style plots. The hero keeps trying stuff, and every time he tries something smart that you as readers would have said, oh, I would have done that. Or even, wow, I didn't even think of that, and that's smart. And they fail spectacularly anyway. Really spectacular failures tend to be this type of plotting, where it's just one way to do it. An example, Indiana Jones in the beginning of the first movie, right? He wants to get this idol. He is really good at getting this idol, right? I mean, the things he does, whipping across chasms, smart with the sand, braving spiders on his back, all these things. He goes with everything and gets out, and then the guy's like, haha, and steals it anyway. Right? You come out of that beginning plot cycle saying, number one, Indiana Jones is awesome because of how cool he was and the stuff he did. And I love him because he struggled so hard. He's very sympathetic. And boy, I hate those people who are mean to him. And he should have won that idol. And that's how that is working, what it's doing to us, and it works wonderfully. So anyway, try-fail cycles. One thing to be careful about is the potential of, as named by a friend of mine, it doesn't actually work in Greek, but I still like it anyway. Deus ex wrench. Deus ex wrench, named by my friend Bryce, is what he calls it when an unforeshadowed problem occurs when it should have been foreshadowed. You're not going to always foreshadow your problems. Sometimes some guy saunters off from off stage and takes your idol away. And sometimes that's okay. And by the way, when we talk about Deus Ex Machina, the need to foreshadow is more and more important as the end of your story comes along. Near the beginning, you don't need to foreshadow things nearly as much because, you can't have the hero be saved by his friend that you haven't foreshadowed. If it's chapter 2, still I would probably want to mention the friend. But, he doesn't know the friend's in the area and the friend comes and saves him. Yeah, it's a Deus Ex Machina, but you're introducing his friend in this way. And, it's going to be less and less fulfilling the closer to the ending, the more you do this. But, foreshadowing you want to generally use all the time. If you read Sanderson's First Law of Magic, which is posted on my website, which is humbly named after myself, it's really about foreshadowing, which really Sanderson's First Law is your ability to use magic to solve problems in your stories is directly proportional to how well your reader understands said magic. Right. Okay? So if you're going to use magic to solve problems, tell us what the characters can do first. You don't have to describe your magic like I do. And in those cases, you have a different type of story. You have one like Lord of the Rings, where you never understand what Gandalf can do, but he's usually not using magic to solve problems, and our main characters aren't either. Magic is this strange, mysterious thing that is causing as much trouble as it's saving. And so that rule really applies to anything. Anytime you want the heroes to be saved in any way, you want to, the reader's enjoyment of that plot structure will be directly proportional to how much they could have guessed that it would have happened without actually guessing it. Does that make sense? You want to have that line where they almost guessed it, but they didn't. And that'll create the really fulfilling twist. So Deus Ex Wrench is kind of the same way, but on the other side. You want to stay away, another word for it is idiot plotting. You want to stay away from things going wrong just because your characters are stupid. And we laugh about this, but a lot of new writers, their first instinct is to make it, they don't get together because this one is acting in a stupid way. Now, if you can foreshadow that person's character and build their character so we know who they are, then they aren't acting in a stupid way, they're acting like they act. Do you see kind of the difference there? And you want to usually stay away from a character not trying something that any normal person would try in order to solve their problems. If the thing that every normal person would try would make them solve all their problems, and if your reader is screaming at your book, oh, just get over it and do it already, you want to rethink that plot cycle. You can't always get away from it, but you at least want to really establish and get who that character is. And it's best if you can find a way to just have them try it anyway, have it fail, and come up with a better thing for them to do later on. All right? Watch for that. It's a very big new writer problem. It's just not having the characters try the normal, natural thing. Okay? So that's try-fail cycles. You've probably seen try-fail cycles described like this in your English classes. This is another way of looking at it, but this should apply to each subplot. And usually what you're doing is that they're overlapping one another with, different things happening until a character moment and a plot moment overlap at the end where the character realizes something about themselves. So you've got a man versus self where they finally overcome the character problem within them at the same time that they need to stand up and do something important, which then causes the plot climax to happen. When you can intersect those, those are our greatest moments, generally. But it looks more like this. And remember, these troughs should be spectacular failures in a lot of the cases. The spectacular failures are awesome. Don't overdo it, but if you can have someone fail like Indiana Jones fails, it's going to be much more fulfilling than if they try something dumb and fail. Strength of your heroes is generally proportional to the strength of your villains. And the best conflicts are ones that can't be solved when intelligent, natural things are tried. Okay? Natural, or you know what I mean. How much time do we have? Ooh, I'm running a little low. All right. And I may have to end just a little bit early so I can sign books and go into the Eli bookshop and things like that, because I have to go get on a plane in a little bit. So we'll talk about one last major thing and then do Q&A. One last major thing is one concept to understand about what makes plots work for readers is to understand the concept of progression. And more than that, the concept of a sense of progression. This is another way of asking yourself about promises and fulfilling them, but it's a more concrete way of looking at it. You want your books to give your readers a sense of progression, that things are moving along. You don't want it to stagnate. There are a lot of different ways to do this, and this is all kind of hand-waving, because as authors, it's a sense of progression. An example of this, the hero running out of bullets in a Western. If he's going to run out of bullets at a dramatic moment, you want to show him shooting bullets and have us know there are only 8 bullets in there. A lot of people aren't going to count the bullets. But I'll show you this better by showing you some of the different types of progression. One of the types we have is a time bomb. Another one is travel. Another one is Inuyasha. Anyone watch Inuyasha? I say that for the anime fans. I'll explain that for the rest of you. It's also known as the Final Fantasy plot. And there are a lot of different ones. These 3 break down into different types. But The idea behind these things is these are a way that you can give your reader a feeling that things are moving forward. You want things to feel like they're moving forward even when people are failing.